kick it off where we typically kick it off with the word authenticity. It's such a buzzword, but to you, what does it mean? What comes up for you when you hear that word?
Oh my God, so many things. I mean, I think that first of all, what comes up is just gratefulness, right? Gratefulness to be raised by a single mom who like really infused that into me and kind of told me, look, the world's going to be really good at telling you everything you're not. So you need to be really good at recognizing everything that you are, right? And your authenticity and what drives you and what those values are. So being authentic to me is really like, how do I center beauty and joy in the center of injustice? Right? Because like this country wasn't built for me, right? All those different spaces and places. I think about how I show up and what that authenticity drives, what choices I make professionally and personally, who I'm around, right? Like what I say no to and what, and the people that are not serving me. So being authentic for me is really part of that grounding, right? And just really thinking about that space and place. I also think about just how my authenticity really drives like what I do in the world, right? And
Mm.
how I show up and how again that same mom and my abuelita really kind of ensured
Oh,
that they knew I was inheriting a struggle, right? And that I had something to do about the world I was inheriting. So fun fact, I don't know if we talked about this, but Roberto Clemente is my grandmother's cousin, right? So famous baseball player, right, in Puerto Rico.
what?
And I know, amazing humanitarian. So when I talk about authenticity being in my DNA, like I really feel that and honor that. And so there's a famous quote he has, it's like, well, if you have an opportunity to do something in the world and you don't, you're wasting your time on earth. And so
Yeah.
like that really hit me from a young age, right? Like I knew that. I knew he was in my lineage. I knew where I came from and I belong. So it's for me, it's really just doing that, being present, being intentional with who I am and being vulnerable too, right? In these spaces that don't lend itself to that. Anytime, well, no, I'm like, anytime I've shown up being authentic, I try to do that all the time. And just this connection you build with people, right? They're like,
Yeah.
wow, you doing that gave me permission to do it, right? From the red lipstick to the hoops to, dancing a little bit in between meetings and things. Yeah, so that's kind of what shows up for me.
Yeah, no pressure, just huge baseball star, huge advocate for a bunch of things. Yeah, I like it's like almost like you have to do something big to follow up in those shoes, right?
Oh my God, for sure. Lots of pressure, right? But I think it's more also the continuing the lineage, right? In our
Yeah.
big and small ways, right? I got no baseball skills. I can cheer. I'm like a really good people raiser. I'm a good hype woman, right? I used to go to all my little brother's baseball games, but that wasn't my thing. I was dancer, right? So I think about what are the pockets and ways I can do that, but definitely honoring number 21. That is my number.
I love that. Tell me a little bit about, like, you mentioned you realized the world wasn't built for you. Like, that's deep. When did you realize that?
Oh my God. And in my very I want to say the womb, right? But really like thinking about, I'm being from Puerto Rico, right? I was very aware of the colonial subjectivity of my island, right? I was very aware from that upbringing in my family. Like my family was very woke, if you will, and also politically
Mm,
advocate, right? And so they were like, look, this is what's happening on the mainland when you go to the continental US. So even having that language of the relationship to the United States and saying we are a part of it. And the Jones Act in 1917 gave us citizenship, but this is why, because they wanted brown bodies to go fight in the World War One. So thinking about those elements, like I grew up kind of knowing that. I want to say I was probably like two, but we only really remember things at five. So for me it was just really knowing that. I think it was also thinking about like I've always had a big mouth, and I think I wanted to use my big mouth to get in some good trouble. So I remember kind of early on in kindergarten in Miami, actually, because we moved when I was young. And I remember like saying hello to the teacher in multiple languages. I think I was like, hello, hola, bonjour. And she was like,
oh,
and she was like, Dania, we speak English here. And I was like, actually, my mom told me I can speak whatever I want. So I think
oh,
for me, though, realizing, oh, my different ways of expressing myself and showing up are not welcome here, right? The system is not welcoming me here. right? And how can I shift that narrative? I think my mom might have been called to the principal's office that time, but at this point, she was just sort of, you keep doing that. That's how I raised you. That's what I taught you. And I remember there's a big difference between my siblings and I. So when they were going to school, I remember teaching them the same thing, being like, remember, you can say hello to your teacher in whatever language you want.
That's fascinating. I have a niece in Florida, and she's, I don't know, 2 or whatever, but she's starting whatever age kids go to school. I'm so like, I have no idea. Whatever.
Well, there's preschool. There's preschool, right? So I think we need help early. So
Well, she's at the point where she can talk though. So maybe kindergarten. I have no idea. Anyway,
we're terrible.
She's starting to go to school, and her grandmother talks to her in Spanish, right? So she grew up, well, early on, like knowing some of these Spanish words, right? But then she goes to school and no one else speaks Spanish. So now when she comes back home and her grandmother talks to her in Spanish, she's like, no, English only, because she now wants to be like, well, no one else is talking Spanish. I want to fit in. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that you got sort of like a different upbringing, if you will, like still maintaining some of that for you.
Oh gosh, and that breaks my heart, right? To like think about that, because language access is so key, and to think of like languages are colonized too, right? I think about all the time that I don't even know what my people actually spoke because they got decimated,
Mm.
so I don't really, so Spanish, English, I'm like, yeah. I want to know what the Indians spoke, right? Like I want that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It was interesting you mentioned that you had a big mouth, right? And that got you into some good trouble. I'm wondering, like, as you grew older, like, how did that, like,
Yeah,
did
no,
you
I mean,
continue to get that feedback?
I mean, yes and no, right? I think as I grew up, right, for me, that big mouth was like really zealous advocacy, right? For me, especially kind of in my formative undergrad years, coming up, it was like activism, right? And in those spaces. In my family, it definitely came out as sort of like, right, and some gender roles. And we can talk about that, right? Because in terms of like, how do you speak up and speak out? Right.
Yeah.
But as an attorney, it was really important for me to like speak in spaces that was. So I didn't kind of receive that kind of space, but it was affirmed, but it's because I picked a career that did that, right? And it wasn't even one of those things where it was like big mouth. And by that I mean, to me, to speak and honor your voice is to fight, and that's one of the purest forms of love, right? So when I think about authenticity, I think about how I lead with love. And to me, love means speaking up. I wrote a really great piece. I'll share it with you, but it was, I used to do spoken word back when I had time in my life.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah, it's actually, I'm pretty good. Not too shabby, I might add.
I got to look up these YouTube clips. They're out there somewhere.
Oh my God. No, this was pre-YouTube maybe. So that's
Oh.
probably, I don't even know what year YouTube came in, but thinking about also coming up, like I was the single earner for my family, I was helping my single mom with my siblings and all those things. So for me to speak up was also like putting my family's livelihood at risk. And I remember just like being
Yeah.
like, oh, like I could lose my job, which means like, all that I'm providing is going to be gone. And I remember coming back to my family, and every single time they're like, no, you speak, we're going to be okay. Because to speak is the fight. And especially, to have a sense of agency. Some of us only have our voice, right? So if we don't speak up, are we really making that difference in the world, the way Roberto said, right? That's how
Yeah.
I see it.
That's deep. I mean, I think it takes a level of representation too, though, because your family is telling you, no, like, no, don't worry about us. Like, keep it going. What made you want to speak up? Like, was it certain injustices that you were seeing? You mentioned, at an early age, being educated on Puerto Rico and the history of its relationship with the US. I'm wondering if there's anything else that you felt the urge or need or desire to speak up for your community.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I grew up mostly, all up and down the East Coast. I think I mentioned Miami, but also northern New Jersey, right? And, I realized that I was a product of everything I'm against. That is to say, I came up in the gifted and talented program. And if you know anything about those programs, they tell children you're only talented in this one area, right? So there's academically talented, music,
Mm.
visual arts, and physical education. But as you can imagine, that AT group, that academically talented group, was predominantly white. And that's the group I was in. and we had access to the best teachers and the best places, right? And then where do you think the Black and brown kids were? In the physical education and the visual arts. And so I was witnessing this, right? And this was supposed to be like the best education. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a product of everything I'm against. How do I dismantle these systems? Why are we telling children that you're only talented in these spaces? And why are we putting the Black and brown kids in these other spaces? Because I'm multi-talented, multi-interested. I could sing, right? I was playing an instrument. Well, I don't know about PE, right? But there were other groups I could be there, I could be in. And so for me, that was another awakening where, I knew I wanted to challenge systems, dismantle them, and then, build to back up something new that really serves everyone.
I'm curious too, because you've had so many of those experiences in very corporate settings as well, like law. Like I can't imagine a more corporate setting, maybe like finance, right? But I think there are certain expectations of what someone in that career field looks like, dresses like, speaks like. So when you thought about authenticity going into some of those spaces, how did you feel?
No, that's really, really good to bring up because and when I was in those spaces, right, that was before we are getting more cognizant around gender identity and sexual orientation, right? So it was very gendered in the male female way, right? I don't think they had even gotten to like anything beyond that. And in terms of being authentic, yeah, it was, it's a very kind of competitive space. And I think women were expected, and I will bifurcate that, right? Women of color, there was this certain like exotification, like my suit can't be right like too tight or like all
Yeah.
those different things that when as a Latina, I'm so proud of my body and I'm proud of like all those different spaces, but I had to be hyper aware for others. And I remember the minute I realized that that was happening, I was so upset with myself because I'm like, wait, why am I conforming to that, right? Like to me that wasn't showing up authentic.
Mhm.
Why am I not embracing the bright bold colors that I love like red, when I felt like I had been exotified by that way, right? Like, especially, thinking about, in the law firm structure, very hierarchical, and the higher up you go, the older and the white and the male it is, right? So
Mhm.
thinking about those, I remember this one time we had a diversity training, and I was like, okay, where where is this coming from? Like, why are we doing this? Because again, it didn't feel authentic. Right.
Mhm.
And so when I think about authenticity, it's really aligning yourself with organizations that also feel authentic to you. So for me, it was one of those moments of like, do I need to leave? Like, what's going on? And it was really one of our clients said, until you get more lawyers that look like me, and he was a Black general counsel, you're not going to get my business. So all of a sudden, we're in this like diversity training, teaching partners how to not call me baby and dear because I'm an attorney. So
Jesus,
yeah.
that's a boss move that I hope to do one day. Like when I have clients or I have an agency, when I have a team, I want to be able to say that.
Oh my
Um,
God, and I think it's something we all do, right? Like, we know the
yeah,
coin drives things.
yeah. Oh,
So
facts, 100%. Somebody, Antonio Lucio, I don't know if you know him. He used to be the previous chief marketing officer at Facebook. When he was at Dell, he did the same thing. He went because he was in charge of like millions of dollars of advertising spend, and he said that he would only work with an agency that had like a certain percentage of Black employees, Hispanic employees, Latino employees, etc. And I was like, yo, yeah, that's how you make change. I'm
I
curious though, because
agree.
you mentioned certain things, and I want to get into that, right? Like being called baby or honey or miss, or like you talk about like that sexualization or objectification of you. Like I think sometimes we tell ourselves stories, we make up stories. We're like, oh, I'm not gonna wear that or do that because they're gonna say XYZ. And those stories are valid, right? Because we've seen those experiences happen to other people, or sometimes it's just like straight up, no, they told me that. So I'm wondering like which one was it for you, or both?
Gosh, it's definitely been both, right? You're trying to get me back to a place that, in some ways, right? Sometimes we forget and sometimes we lock up kind of thing.
Yeah.
But thinking about it, it was, you know, one, right, there's mechanisms to report that stuff, right? And then, but again, and thinking about authenticity, like are those mechanisms really built up, right? To have people be authentic, because some people are authentically like that, right? Some people are authentically, right, sexist, racist, all those things. So there's this this element of that too. But it was really both, right? It was really, and the power dynamics, right? I was coming up in my career, right? Young Latina. I'm already a part of a profession. It's only 2% Latina lawyers.
Wow.
Right. That's wild. So, thinking about that, how I'm carrying it for my people really has you think about that too, right? So speaking up doesn't become an individual act. It's this like collective community ancestral thing of like, I don't want to, there's too few of us, so I need to
Yeah.
keep pushing, right? And
Yeah.
I need to get forward. And where is this on the sliding scale? The fact that you even have to think that, it's definitely ways. And what are the ways that I'm going to approach this, right? Does it matter to like heal myself first and all those different things,
Yeah. It's a lot
So
of
it was
pressure. Like I used to tell myself, damn, if I do something crazy, then they're not gonna hire another one of us, kind of thing. So yeah. Sorry, go.
exactly, because you're representing everyone the same way. I mean, and think about it in school,
Unfortunately, yeah.
right? Everyone goes to you like, hey, what do you think for the Puerto Ricans? And I'm like, or the Latinos, right? I'm like, I don't know, ask all of them, but you're right. Or it's oh my God, you just brought me back to a story that happened to me once. There was a case involving a Puerto Rican, and I think it was a time where the recession, right? And they were looking to save money on translators or something. They're like, you're Puerto Rican, you should do this. And I was like, no,
Drives me
no,
crazy.
no. Yeah, it's wrong in so many ways.
Yeah. So were some of those things said to you directly, or do you think that was just like your own perception going into it?
Oh no, these are all said. These are facts. These are all receipts. Yeah, those things
Oh,
were said to me. And in that moment, right? It's that like, did that really happen? Like all the mental
yeah.
gymnastics you do in your head of like, okay, what do I do? What do I say? And again, it's the power dynamics. Okay, this is my boss, this is someone on the side, and I was like, my favorite phrase though is, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Like that that causes people to pause and be like, oh wait. So the reactions to that, usually I'm like, oh really? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by the Puerto Rican should take a Puerto Rican? Or, what do you mean by baby? Not really
Oh
sure.
my God. When did you get the confidence to even ask that question though? Because that's an uncomfortable situation. Like there's an awkward pause, there's a silence, you know what I mean? And it's interesting. Like for me, before I used to like wait for one performance review to come in, or maybe two, to be like, oh, I got the validation, I'm doing a good job, so that if they come at me, I got the receipts that say like, yo, I'm killing it at work. You know what I mean? For other people, it's like a certain age or like experience level in their career where they're like, I'm gonna start, you know, speaking up for myself, defending myself. Like, when did you get the confidence to ask people, what do you mean by that?
Gosh, again, I'm so grateful. I was so young. Like I get my family. I've all
Really?
like yeah, that's why I said it was the womb. Like those seeds were planted young. I'm telling you, I'm sure you know how they say you should play music for your, well, I don't know if you know, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's these things that said you should play like music for your babies because they could hear it in the womb. I
Hmm.
have to ask my mama what she was playing for me, because maybe it was like guerrera music or something. So I'm just like, I feel like I came out with that, but she also cultivated that. And I'll have to say, I had a space to come back to talk about those things, right? Like when those things happened, I came home to really like debrief the day and strategize with my family, right? Because
Really?
so yeah,
Oh
so
my
that's what I'm
God,
saying.
that's beautiful. And I'm just saying that's beautiful. And maybe, yeah, I don't know which one would resonate more with people, but in my experience, like I had those conversations to myself. I think that's what made it so difficult for me.
Yeah, and also because what I was grateful about, like that family aspect, is that, it wasn't at work because, people are too small souls. Like that, building that trust with people that like they're
Yeah.
not gonna go say it. So like I certainly knew not to confide in a colleague, right? But I could do that. And friendships, right? I think that when I was coming up being in DC, there's a lot of young Latino professionals, and so there's a group. So I felt like the 2% of Latinas and lawyers were all congregated in DC because we all knew each other, right? So like there were spaces for that too. But I'm really, really grateful. And I think it was my mom's own journey and evolution. She had me at 20. She left Puerto Rico to go to college by herself with me. So there was this like inbred confidence in her actions that she had to have, that she was like, my little girl's gonna have this, right? Like, I'm finishing college to be an example for her. And so I want to make sure I instill her from the beginning with that.
I love that. Because you referenced earlier, something is in the room and you look around, you're like, yo, am I going crazy? Because in many times, like, there's not that person next to you in the meeting because it's only 2%, right? There's not that person in the room that you can help like confirm, like, did that just happen? Um, and I would often, like, sure, there were some people at work, but it wasn't that many, and I'd often didn't feel comfortable sharing some of those experiences. And then I got home and I'm just like, I'm not gonna tell my mom. She's not gonna understand. She's gonna give me that advice of just like, that happens. Keep working, brush it off, kind of thing. So the fact you had that safe space is, I'm sure, was so instrumental to just like expressing some of those experiences and getting over it, and seeing how, to your point, how you can strategize to work in that space and still deal with some of those things.
It's so true. I will say though, it's been an evolution, right? Because I think we had to
Yeah.
deal with our own like internal colorism, racism. I love
Mm.
my abuelita and she's okay with saying that, but she'd always be like, lighter's better, like, oh,
Mm.
all those things. So especially in the work I do now, I remember when I was first making the switch from, attorney to chief diversity officer, they were like, ¿Qué es eso? What's that? Right? They were like, diversity, why would you need that, and then there was a, they don't care about us, why should you care about them? And I'm like, I don't know who us was, but to see their own evolution and that same safe space that I had to like cultivate and talk about that, we're able to talk about that and break that down to now the point they're like, one, super proud, right? But two, also like, hey, this is happening. Are you protesting? What's going on? What are you doing? I feel like they're the mega activists here and like putting the pressure on me, like, Dania, dale, we need to mobilize. And let me not get started on Twitter. My mom's always having me tweet for her
No way. About what?
about mobilizing the vote. That's today's right now. So everyone go vote. She in the Latino community. And so we just taught her how to text. So Twitter's another thing. So I'm her ghostwriter for
Oh my
Twitter.
God, your mom's gonna be on Twitter. She's gonna blow up.
Exactly. She is. Talk about going viral. That's gonna be her. I think she has a pseudo name too. So that's
Oh,
good for
so
me.
you'll never know.
You'll never know.
Tell me about that move though, from law to the education. Like, why that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I was really grateful for the criminal defense space. But what I realized too is that I saw a lot of the ugly in the world, like
Mm.
the real ugly, and things that, especially as someone who shows up authentically and is like connected to being vulnerable and stuff, really impacted me in ways that I didn't think, right? Thinking about when you talk about federal law, right? You're talking about homicide, embezzlement, child porn, like all these things that are very heavy. And the thread in this, my client's story, I went in like super, like, I'm gonna win every case. Like I'm gonna, and here I was struggling. I was like, wow, I was like Sotomayor, but thinking about Sonia Sotomayor, but I was like Elle Woods, legally blonde, except I'm legally brunette, right? So I'm the Latina version of that, right? So we need to make a Latina version, like legally brunette or something, because I was like, wow,
Word.
we don't have an example. Anyway, so I went in thinking I'm gonna win every case, and like I left saying like if I had one late day less in jail, right? Like one like sentencing guidelines and attracting that. And then the thread of my client's story really being lack of access and opportunity. And I was so
Um,
grateful because yeah, I was like one of those superstar kids, A plus and all those things. But I remember that like there was always someone along the way, especially it's not like I woke up like that, right? Like you don't wake, well, maybe you probably wake up amazing. I don't, right? I have to I have to generate that, right? It's not, I don't wake up feeling like super empowered and all those things. Like it's a generative process. But I remember like no one asked them to step into their greatness when they didn't see it in themselves, right? So then they sat and like everything society was telling them. And so for me, the switch was like, one, taking care of myself, but two, how do I do it so that we're never at this point, right? Because for me, that's the end point. We're talking death penalty. We're talking taking people's lives and putting them in these structures again, that are very racist
yeah.
and systematically so. So for me, going into higher ed was like, how can I eradicate that. And now I oversee a division where in my division sits our Hope Scholars program, which is our formerly incarcerated
Wow.
students. So for them, actually, I had one of them do one of my intro videos, and it was such a beautiful moment where they shared with me, like, you're the first person in this role that I feel validated by. Like, you get my story, you get me. And he's like, I don't know what to expect. I just said I would help with this video, and then it's you, and you're sharing your
Wow.
story. And that moment literally brought me to tears. And I was like, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm authentic when I show up, because
Yeah.
they saw their authenticity, right? And they felt like in a space where they didn't belong, they did. And that's centering beauty, right? To me, that was a beautiful moment in the center of injustice.
That is beautiful. Wow. Yeah. I'm curious, what do you think about you where he felt validated? He or she? I don't remember what you said.
Yeah. Shared understanding, right? Like I knew the world they had navigated, right? I knew, I understood, right? And I was able to say, actually, like, I was fighting that fight for you, right? It was so funny because even then, like, my own clients who were Black or brown were like, you're my lawyer, right? Like, they're so used to it being a white person, right? So they were like questioning me because I didn't like have that portrayal of those things, right? I also think there was a shared Latinidad there, right? And so I was able to like connect and talk about that. And also just, I can't speak for them because I don't know what their previous experience was, but for me it was that moment of the story I shared of why I even went into higher ed. That moment just like was like that light bulb. I was like, aha, and here it is, like week 2, I'm meeting them,
Yeah.
and I oversee a division. They are here. Like, this is my why.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. One of my previous guests, shout out to Catalina. She had this analogy or this phrase, not analogy, but she said, like when you are your most authentic self, what you become is a mirror for other people. And they don't necessarily see exact match, right? Being reflected back at them, but it could be like a little shard, a little piece of themselves that they see in you. You know what I mean? And that's what gives them permission to be like, oh shit, Danielle's doing it. Like that means I could do it.
Right.
I can imagine how often that happens to you, probably. Um, like people just be like, oh my God, you're in that position? Like, wait, what?
So many times I have to say it, even and it's something that
From
uh
students, right? I'm assuming. Yeah.
no, from students, from faculty and staff. I say that because, like, I have to go to events and all those things, and there was a homecoming event, and I've, again, baseball, right? I've always wanted a walk-up song. I love when they play that, right? And the batter does it. Like, I walk around life as if I had a walk-up song, right? And it changes. So when I'm walking to the office, like, it's in my head, I swear.
What would
So,
be your walk-up song?
oh my God, right now, like, I'm feeling a lot of Farruko, right? So, like,
Okay,
Pepas would
yeah.
be, yeah, one of that. And then, like, I gotta give shout out to Bad Buddy. All right, a lot of Puerto Rico. Oh, I just heard amazing the Loud podcast that went through the history of reggaeton with
I gotta listen
narrated by
to it.
Ivy Queen. Oh,
I
it's
gotta listen to
amazing.
it.
So anyway, it brought up a lot of great songs, like
Yo,
starting with
Evie Queen. Oh my
Vico
God.
C, El General,
Throwback.
like, yeah, talk about like all those things. So I feel like my walk-up song would be a myriad of like a mix of reggaeton, salsa, some pop, hip hop, like all of them. Anyway,
How
Farruko is
long
my jam right now.
how long is this walk up?
Oh no, there's walk-ups for different things. Like, you need to look, when you're being authentic, you need all those walk-up songs, like all those things.
I
So
I
anyway,
do I do think it's hilarious though, because if you ever go to a baseball game, since it's so Latino based, like all the walk-up songs are in Spanish.
reggaeton.
It's hilarious.
Yes.
It's like,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
it's like you're going to the club. It's hilarious.
I already have been to a couple of Oakland A's games out here, and like, let me tell you, I get up and dance every single one. And let me tell you, the songs in Spanish aren't just by the Latino players. Like, it's infectious. Their
Ooh.
counterparts, like, I saw some of the folks doing that. Anyway, so there was they were introducing me to speak because I had to. And I remember that day, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna wear my school hoodie, hoops, right? Like, and some sneakers. And like, I like to be in the background, right? Because I like to push narratives of what it means to be at my level, right? And have this role.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
the song came on, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna dance on my way up, like it was a walk up, right? And so I remember that space where like my brother was in the audience and he was like, "Don't tell anybody I'm your brother, so that like I could hear what they say about you, because that's part of like having your back." And he's like, "When you went up there, like she's the person, right? And like, oh, she can dance and like all these things." So this like authenticity of they were like, "Oh, we could dance too when we go up and do these spaces, right?" Like it doesn't have to be this like stuffy, stoic blazer, hello and welcome kind of thing. I was like,
How did that make you feel when he told you that? Were you
oh,
nervous
so
even going into it? You know what I mean?
oh no, I was, right? I was like, I'm a trip, right? Or should I?
How
And then you
much?
start thinking like, and then like who's in the audience? Like,
Mhm.
right? Like, are they gonna, what kind of moves do I do? Oh yeah. And these are like split-second decisions, right? But again, it was just really wanting me to stay true to who I am, right? And have people see that like the reason I took on these roles too is to model and people to be what they could see, right? And so what they see really matters to me and all those places. So now I felt really good. I was just like, all right, I was like, what's my next walk-up song? Like every event, I should have one.
It's like you need your own DJ to start curating your walk-up playlist.
Do you know any? That's such a brilliant idea. I actually need one. If I don't go, can you hear me? Do you have a DJ?
We'll work on it. No, that's beautiful. So I'll end with this last one too, because your story's dope, and it's fascinating too, because I think most people start like at some point in their phase, they go through the code switching and the shame, but your support system, shout out to your mom, because she held it.
Shout out
Shout out mommy. No, but seriously, like she held it down. I mean, she created this safe space for you where y'all can like talk about these situations. She sounded so empowering and motivating and shapeful in just in your confidence. So that's so dope. But we're not done, working on ourselves. We're still working on a bunch of things. Like, what inspires you to continue going and continue being your most authentic self in these spaces?
the opportunities and the platform, right? So yes, very grateful for my mother and but also that responsibility piece, right? So what inspires me is like all the people I don't know, right? All the people that I know are watching. It's, with every step of my career, the amount of people that say, "Hey, I've been watching you from the background and you're inspiring me. Hey, I've been watching you," and like and I hear it from all over the world to the point where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I have a gift and I'm a woman of faith too. Like God gave me something and I need to do something with it and about it." And so for me, it's every day, like, what's my impact? What have I done? Like, what am I grateful for? Right. And for me, I think about the opportunity to do this and to now that have this platform at Berkeley, right? Number one in Forbes, shout out to that. That platform is something that I don't take lightly. And I have a responsibility to do about for all of us, right? So that people know that this is what it means to be number one authentic, right? And to number one serving this and all this stuff. So when I say an administrator of joy and authenticity, like that inspires me, right? Because I know this journey isn't my own. So many have walked it before me, so many will walk it after me. I want to make my ancestors proud, but I want to make, whoever's ancestor I am proud too. So that for me is and it's going to be things I never know of, right? When you think about legacy building, it's not something you do intentionally. It's sort of like, oh wow, like that's what happened because of that. So this is for the gente. This is not just for me.
Mi gente, that wraps up this week's episode of the Quién Tú Eres podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor, leave us a rating and a review. It just helps us in the algorithm to ensure that these stories get heard by as many people as possible. Scaling these stories and experiences is the only way that we're going to redefine professionalism. Thank you and see you next week.